Pete Grannis is the former DEC commissioner, and as of today, he's got a new job as special counsel at Environmental Advocates of New York. Pete, thanks very much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Liz, I'm glad to be with you.
And congratulations on the new job.
Well, thank you. I think it's a really exciting opportunity to work with a group that I have worked with for many years and admired, and now I hope I can be helpful to them.
Well, I want to get back to that in terms of what you see the vision for this particular group going forward at a time that when there's so much going on environmentally in the state. But I do want to touch on hydrofracking briefly. What is your response, your immediate response to the action the governor took over the weekend?
Well, I think the governor did the right thing in vetoing the bill, and I think the executive order calling on the department to carefully review every single aspect of hydraulic fracturing and the deep well activities that are associated with it to make sure that if it proceeds, it's done in a way that fully protects New York's environment is totally appropriate. So I think it's a sort of a good outcome. I know there was some pressure to have him sign the bill, but I think he did the right thing in vetoing it and then clearly directing the department to continue its work to carefully review this activity.
Yeah, we've heard from advocates like Mark Ruffalo, for example, and some of the Senate Democrats who say they actually really carefully crafted this bill purposely to have a ban on all sorts of fracturing. But there is, as the governor said, an industry that's been going on for decades in New York, and it's not been generating the kind of environmental disasters that people are terrified of. So you think that this is a fair middle way?
I do, and I think this really focuses on this added increase of the activity associated with deep well hydrofracking that has been so much in controversy in the last 2 years, but the ongoing activity of gas and oil well drilling in New York, which the department has handled, I think, with great care and great responsibility for the last 2 or 3 decades, I think should continue. And that's what the governor recognized in his executive order.
You had some concerns when you left, and this was part of what you cited in a memo that was apparently integral to your firing by the administration. But your concerns were that if cuts continued to be made at the DEC, that there wouldn't be sufficient oversight to deal with hydrofracking of the sort that's being proposed.
Well, I think that the real thrust was that it was going to deal with the timing. I mean, the laws are on the books, the responsibility is on the books. And to the extent that that requires manpower to oversee that activity, if the manpower isn't there, it's just going to mean that the activity proceeds very slowly. It will proceed carefully, but it will be a big issue of timing if we don't have the resources, if the department doesn't have the resources to process the well drilling applications and to make sure that the on-site monitoring takes place.
Do you believe at some point in New York that hydrofracking can actually take place safely?
Well, I think that is what the draft environmental impact statement sort of implies, that there are numerous risks associated with this activity. We sought to identify those risks and identify ways to make sure that they didn't impact the environment. Obviously, we got a lot of comments, as you know, 14,000 of them.
I know.
The agency is weighing through each and every one of those comments to make sure that if they raise relevant points, that the draft environmental impact statement will be adjusted accordingly to reflect those concerns.
How is it possible, actually? I mean, one of your complaints was that the cuts were too broad brush, and I think that there are a lot of people who are concerned about that, even those people who say that state government needs to be reduced in size, that it needs to be done in a surgical manner. And part of your concern was that it was too broad. Do you think that the agency can, in fact, be reduced in size in a safe way so that the mission is not completely obliterated?
Well, you know, nothing that was involved in those cuts. The laws are on the books. There's a whole body of law that governs what DEC does, both federal law and state law. Those laws will be on the books, as will the regulations. And the agency will be obligated to carry on all of the activities that it does under state law. Obviously, the amount of resources will depend on how quickly those activities can be undertaken. So it may take longer to process permits. It may take longer to go out and do site inspections. And there are a lot of things that happen as a result of the very large budget cuts and loss of personnel that the agencies had to experience over the last 2.5 years.
So what does that mean, for example, for a New Yorker, just an average New Yorker who might want to, I don't know, hunt, fish, hike, ski in New York?
Well, in those activities, it might not mean that much. It will mean that the trail maintenance and some of the outdoor facilities that we maintain, boat launches and other things, may not be maintained as regularly as they have been in the past. It'll mean that some of the facilities in our campgrounds aren't kept up as carefully as they have been in the past. If you're a business seeking a permit from DEC, it may take a lot longer to get that permit cleared. and that means money. Business time is money for businesses, and they need to have a timely response on some of the permit applications that are filed with the agency. The real risk, and I think we tried to highlight that in the memo, was the concern over backsliding. We've made great gains in the last 2 or 3 decades in cleaning up the water and land and air of New York State. And the risk associated with not having the resources to maintain those very, very important victories over the last few decades, I think, is what was most on my mind when we wrote that memo. These are challenges. These are very challenging times. The current administration and the next administration, have faced and will face very difficult choices. But the maintenance of a sound environmental policy, I think, is integral to a good economic policy in this state. If people want jobs to grow, businesses have to be able to get permits in a hurry. Permits have to be fair. They have to be done properly. They have to not be subject to litigation. And clearly, there's, I think, has been a lack of appreciation of the nexus between good environmental policy, good environmental regulation, good environmental management, and a stronger growing economy.
But you see that in so many different environmental issues. I mean, you even see that in energy issues when you talk about, for example, power plant siting. And there seems to be a disconnect between the business community and the environmental community. Is there any way, I mean, the hydrofracking might be a good example, that it seems to be a compromise, even though there are people on both sides who aren't so pleased. There's got to be a way going forward where business and environmental interests can move together to get jobs into New York.
That's absolutely right. I think that's at the heart of some of the position papers that the new administration, the Cuomo administration, put out during the campaign. And clearly that ability to blend wise environmental policies with good, sound business policies is going to be the challenge as we move ahead.
Just before we leave this topic, in terms of you leaving the Patterson administration, have you spoken at all to Governor Patterson since that decision?
No, I have not. I find that disappointing, but I've not had the opportunity to talk to the governor since my termination. And
you did put in a call to him?
I put in 2 calls and was informed by the governor's secretary that I was not going to be allowed to speak to the governor.
So going forward then, do you believe that Andrew Cuomo is going to make some of those difficult choices that you just talked about? And have you spoken at all to him? Because there were some advocates after you were let go from the Patterson administration who actually wanted to see you brought back by the Cuomo administration.
Well, I think the governor-elect has got many challenges. Obviously, almost all of them related to the very difficult problems of closing a very large budget deficit. And I'm hoping that they bring to this new administration a sort of a business plan, a business approach, where they actually consider the implications and the consequences of making decisions. These are going to be very tough decisions, but they ought to at least have the curiosity and the concern about what those decisions mean for carrying out the core missions of DEC and every other agency that they have control of.
Have you spoken at all to the Cuomo administration about returning before you accepted the job with environmental advocates?
I have not.
So tell us about the new job then. What exactly is it that you're going to be doing?
Well, the new job is working with environmental advocates, a group that I worked with for many, many years as a legislator, and for the last 4 years as a commissioner. I found them to be a very interesting group. They obviously have a broad reach on a host of environmental issues, and my expectation is that if I can do any good for them, will be to try to help them strategically sharpen their message, to help remind New Yorkers how important the environment is, how important it is to have good environmental laws and good environmental regulations and good environmental regulators through DEC in place to make sure that the environmental gains that we've made over the last decades are maintained.
The governor-elect has so much on his plate, and he actually had in his policy books in terms of the environment a lot of different things. And again, you're seeing that juxtaposition of business, energy, and environment. These areas, of course, are so interlinked that you really can't separate them from each other. He's got Indian Point. He's got issues regarding the Adirondack Park. He's got hydrofracking. I'm sure there's a whole pantheon of others. What do you think is the most important for the new administration to deal with from an environmental aspect?
Again, I think it's to protect against backsliding. This issue, I keep coming back to this. We've made these gains. We have to make sure that they're maintained. People want to be able to go to the beach and have clean water, but clean water is also essential for public water supplies. Air is critically essential for people to make sure that the kids don't have asthma attacks in inner cities. And I think there's so many issues, Liz, that are associated with the environment, and that's part of the difficulty. It's Parks is very concise. It's just parks.
Right.
DEC has 18 or 19 very distinct responsibilities, from hunting and fishing to land management of all the great public properties we manage in the Adirondack and Catskill parks, dealing with all the air, water, solid waste issues. It goes, the list goes on and on. It's a very, very diverse agency with a lot of responsibilities, and obviously the concern is to make sure that those responsibilities are handled properly in the years ahead.
You said during an interview that you gave recently that you thought that there was a real disconnect and a lack of appreciation in the Patterson administration for what you just talked about, the sort of broad diversity that DEC has. Do you think that the Cuomo administration has that sensitivity, or will?
Well, I think it's shown in the transition books, or the books that they put out during the campaign, that they do understand this. Again, I think their big concern is going to be balancing the budget, and hopefully as they move ahead with that, they factor in the issues that DEC shouldn't be disproportionately cut, because it's easier to cut environmental programs than it is to cut health or education programs. There's a host of activities that all of the agencies do, and I think a business-like approach, a business plan approach, where these decisions are thought out, carefully monitored, and the consequences well understood before they're actually implemented, will be critically important, and that's what I felt was lacking in sort of the waning months of the Patterson administration.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us, Pete Grannis. It's going to be good to see you back in Albany.
Thanks very much, Liz. It's nice to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate your time.